Hello and welcome to the Skyrival channel, and today I'm going to show you guys my new personal 4K ITX gaming and editing workstation PC. Yeah, I just repeated the title of the video, but there is no other way I can describe this absolute unit of a PC. So more or less, this is the PC that'll be carrying the channel forward as I move into full-time YouTube, which is why I've been taking such a while to get back to making videos, because as you can probably tell behind me and with the new PC, I have been doing some things around the studio to kind of gear it up to just do this thing full-time, which I enjoy. Of course, I'll get into the specifications, give you guys all the goodies, as well as some benchmarks, because you may be curious to see how this kind of an ITX Tower PC would do in workstation applications and of course gaming, which that's going to be really cool too, because I also kind of redid my personal setup. But before that, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community full of creatives and technicians just like me, where they offer a lot of online courses for numerous amounts of topics. So as a matter of fact, with this new PC here, I will be slowly transitioning from Premiere Pro to DaVinci Resolve, and I, for the most part, can kind of get how to work with DaVinci, but I don't know how to use Fusion, which will allow me to make those really cool benchmark graphs that you guys see in my PC build videos. I don't know how to work that out, but luckily Skillshare offers a course from VFX Film called DaVinci Resolve 15 Fusion, which I'm definitely gonna give a watch and make sure I learn how to do correctly so I can give you guys some really nice looking benchmark graphs. And best of all, I'll be doing all of this, of course, through an ad-free experience, which you won't get through YouTube. So I'll be able to purely focus on just learning that with this new PC. So if you're interested in ditching Premiere and going to DaVinci Resolve, or you just want to check out Skillshare, I'll have a link at the top of the description where the first 1,000 of you to click it will get a free trial to Skillshare Premium. And see, afterwards, you want to actually purchase a full-on membership. It can cost as low as $10 a month annually. And with that, back to the video. So the PC is quite striking, I'll admit, and you may be wondering what the specs are given the form factor of the overall PC, which I guess we'll start off with the most obvious components first, that being the RTX 3080 Founders Edition card. Now, luckily, this card was a reviewer's unit from NVIDIA, which is why I have it in this PC. And you may be thinking, how is that style of a graphics card gonna fit in this sort of case? Because the Founders Edition cooler design on those 3000 series cards are not like traditional AIO designs. It's a little bit different. But luckily, with this case that I've chosen, I think it'll work out well. As you can see from the B-roll, you'll be able to intake in fresh air from the side of the case and exhaust it through hopefully an uninterrupted part of the case. So I think it's gonna work great, and more importantly, it's gonna allow me to edit footage a lot faster, because on my old PC, I had an RX 5700 Radeon card, which was great for gaming, but just could not do it in Premiere Pro when I was skimming through live on my H.265 footage that's really compressed and quite hard to use on a traditional gaming PC. But I guess also for gaming, the 3080 is pretty much the most I could have gone with for this sort of form factor of a case. If I went with a 3090, which I answered in a pretty relevant TikTok, it actually wouldn't have allowed me to get this, which I'll explain later. So I think the 3080 is the perfect compromise between getting enough power I need for editing and of course casual gaming, but also working with the form factor of this case, which ultimately brings it to being such a monster when it comes to video editing. So on that note, I'll actually just go ahead and talk about what all this stuff up here is. So this is a 4TB Samsung 860 Pro SSD, and behind it, in a carbon vinyl wrap, I have two 16TB Samsung Exos hard drives in RAID 1. Now you may be asking, yeah, that is quite a bit. So to explain, the two hard drives are going to be set up in RAID 1, and that is going to be permanent storage if I want to store any finished videos or spare B-roll that I think could be useful to use in later videos. And in RAID 1, that's going to be 16TB. It's going to be mirrored across two drives, so I think it's going to be good. So that's going to provide a little bit of extra security And for what I'm working with as far as the A7S III, I work on H.265, so the footage for the most part is going to be compressed. It's not going to be like a Blackmagic 6K RAW file that's going to be huge. My video project file shouldn't be too big to require a separate NAS, so I think this will do for the most part. And it's going to be local to the PC, which is great. Now for that 4TB 860 Pro, which is quite an interesting choice for an SSD, that's going to be the video editing SSD, where I'll be putting the footage I'll be filming like from this video onto there, shoving it right into Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve, and then exporting the final video to that same SSD. Which probably leads to another question, why didn't you just use an M.2 SSD then? Because those have really big read and write speeds, and that would just still be a lot faster than that, but I have a reasoning. We'll get to that later. So now let's go ahead and turn around the PC and show you guys the other side. Now you see why I started with the other side, because this side, while still pretty, is not as clean. it's quite compact. There's a lot happening here. But let's start with the processor, which is the Ryzen 9 3950X. I know what you're thinking. Why not the 5950X if you're gonna go completely balls to the wall for a video editing PC? To put it simple, I couldn't get my hands on a 5950X. That's pretty much the bottom line. If I could, I would have. I even asked AMD if they wanted to send out a review sample for this project, but no. So I'm gonna stick it to my 3950X that I got on r/hardware swap for $600 brand new back in October. And to cool that beast and maybe even overclock it if the temperatures will allow, there is a 360mm AIO in this case, along with 3 Thermaltake ToughFan 12s. That's one of the main attractions for this case, in my opinion, is the fact that you can squeeze in one of those AIOs into this case and still have room for everything else, all the way from, of course, you know, the 3080, but more importantly, that 3.5-inch hard drive RAID 1 setup and SSD. Now we're brought to the M.2 SSDs that I have in here, which explains why none of them are being used for specifically the video editing drive. I have my reasonings why. And we'll start with my 4TB Corsair MP400 that was sent over from Corsair. That is a QLC PCI Gen 3.0 SSD on the back side of this motherboard, which, funny enough, you can actually see the Corsair logo from the back side, which is really cool. And that'll be the game storage SSD and the video editing cache SSD. So to talk on the video editing cache part, say if you're working in Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve, you can set a separate location, of course, for where the program is installed, which can be like your boot drive. Then you can house all of your video footage on a different hard drive or different SSD. And if you want to have an even more organized setup, you can set the cache for all of your video projects on another storage device. And having those 3 sectors partitioned up across 3 different drives will result in the best video editing performance. So I'm gonna double up that MP400 as a cache drive and a game storage drive, since that sort of drive isn't gonna be doing sustained write speeds for a really long time. And plus it's 4 terabytes and it's sponsored. So of course I'm gonna use it to the fullest, and I'm just gonna unload my whole Steam, Epic Games, and whatever else library onto that drive and get those really fast read and write speeds at the same time. But even more ludicrous is the boot drive, which is the ADATA S70. This is their brand new 2 terabyte PCI Gen 4.0 Premier M.2 SSD, and it is blazing fast. It can get read speeds of up to 7,400 megabytes per second, which is close to topping out at the maximum bandwidth possible, I think, for a PCI Gen 4.0 M.2 slot. For comparison, this is my old 2 terabyte 8200 Pro from ADATA on my NZXT H1, that's PCI Gen 3.0, versus the ADATA S70 PCI Gen 4.0 2 terabyte hard drive. So same capacity, different PCI generations, and look at the difference in read and write speeds. Now, in real world usage, I probably won't be able to tell the difference a whole lot, but that drive is just on a next generation PCI controller. It's on PCI Gen 4.0, obviously, and it's a TLC drive. So it's got a lot running for it, and that's absolutely why it is the main boot drive where I'll be hosting all my main programs on, as well as Windows. Oh, and we haven't even gotten to the power supply and RAM, which I'll quickly knock off. I have 64 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance LPX memory clocked in at 3600 megahertz at a CAS latency of 18. Again, sponsored by Corsair. Thank you so much, because my old NZXT PC had only 16 gigabytes of DDR4 memory, which was used up all the way in my video editing projects and probably caused the most stuttering when I was editing footage. So having that times 4 should eliminate a lot of worries. And as for the power supply, I have an 850 watt SFX 80 Plus Gold power supply from Cooler Master. And this is their top of the line SFX 80 Plus Gold power supply. And if you are an ITX PC case user and you absolutely want the most power possible in the smallest package for a power supply, look no further than that 80 Plus Gold offering from Cooler Master. And to finish everything up, for the motherboard, I've chosen the Asus ROG Strix X570i ITX motherboard. The main reason why I chose that over like a B550 ITX board is because those X570 boards have more onboard USB ports on the back, which will be useful in my setup because I'll just be hooking up a lot of USB Type-B cables to the underside of this PC case so I can utilize those USB 3.0 ports on my Gigabyte monitors as extra ports. So I just need as many as possible for this PC, which that X570 Strix model was able to afford. And of course, since I'm going with a 3950X, which is a 16-core chip, I'm gonna want an X570 motherboard. Nonetheless, it might be a little bit much for a B550, especially if I wanted to overclock it. So I had to go with that more expensive offering, but I don't regret it. And then finally, the part you guys probably all wanted to know about, the case. This is the Sliger SV590 version 2. So I found out this case after checking out the Phanteks Evolve Shift 2, that recent ITX tower that just got released, because I was looking at, of course, making a new ITX tower PC, and my main complaint with it was the 140mm AIO maximum cooling capacity for the processor, which for me, I didn't want to settle with. I needed at least a 240 or 280, and this case offers a 360, along with everything else that you see here in a tower style package. And as for the total price of this machine, I don't know. I'm not gonna put a price on it because I won't put a price on what sort of machine will allow me to produce you guys the most enjoyable content for my YouTube channel. So I don't know how expensive this is. You're welcome to do your own calculations, but I will say the size wouldn't suggest anything crazy expensive until you open up the side panels. Either way, I am really pleased with this overall PC and how it turned out. I will be testing it right after this section, but you know those renders of PC cases and you're like, man, those look really cool. But when you actually get it in person and you build your own system in it, that almost looks like what they have, but it just doesn't look the same. It doesn't look as cool. This PC case looks just as cool in the promo photos and promo renders as it does in real life, which is really cool. And I don't think there's a lot of cases like this out there, so it's very unique. And overall, I'm satisfied. Everything works, installed Windows, got my programs on there, and after this video, I'm gonna hook it up to the main setup and get going. Okay, I went ahead and took that PC, managed to shove it behind this triple ultra-wide setup on my right, which should be your left if you're watching this video. And so far, everything's working good. I only got one blue screen of death, which is good, but so far, no postcode errors, no boot errors, and everything seems fine so far, hopefully. But let's talk about performance between my new PC versus the old, starting with editing, which is the main reason why I upgraded my PC. So I went ahead and took this Adobe Premiere Pro project on my old PC, moved it over to my new PC and compared render times, And when it comes to the overall rendering time between my old PC, which had a 9700K and an RX 5700 and 16 gigs of RAM versus my new 3950X, 3080 and 64 gigs of RAM, the total rendering time on my old PC was 17 minutes and 29 seconds, and the new PC was 15 minutes and 25 seconds. Both used hardware accelerated rendering along with rendering each video file at 4K at 35 megabits per second. But there's a little more to that. When it comes to temperatures, the new PC, despite what it looks like, was actually running a lot cooler. Its CPU and GPU temps were lower than the old PC, especially in the CPU department, where on my old PC, it peaked out at 95 degrees Celsius on that 9700K being cooled by that single 140mm radiator in the H1, whereas in here, I got that 360 rad, no problem. But most of the gains were actually noticed when I was editing the footage live in my timeline in Premiere Pro, and I even tweeted this out, but I can take my super compressed, high bitrate, H.265 footage with baked in 24-bit audio from my A7S III, put it right into my Premiere Pro timeline, and just start cutting it up and editing it live with no holdups. Because on my old PC, there'd be this 5-second buffer anytime I press the play button before I can get to editing. And after about like 30 seconds, it just crap out on me. And so far, that is absolutely not the case with this 3080, 3950X, and 64 gigs of memory. No problem. So editing, I think, is totally worth it just for having that much better timeline performance that'll increase my productivity and getting the most editing I can done on the new PC, even if the overall rendering time didn't go down that much. But even then, the temperatures did go down. But what about gaming performance? Well, I went ahead and took my favorite game, Forza Horizon 4, which I remember playing a lot on my old PC, compared it to the new one, and there's a very huge difference in frames per second. There's about 91 on my old PC with 166 on my new one, which is a huge difference and does satisfy me because these three monitors behind me can go up to 165 Hertz in total refresh rate. So that means I'm making the most out of my monitors on my super expensive PC, so that's good. But as far as some other games that I benchmarked on the new PC, especially since this is a triple ultra wide monitor setup, I actually went ahead and booted up my sim racing setup in Assetto Corsa competitive, I'm not Italian, and I ran the game at ultra settings and surprisingly got 61.3 frames per second in that triple ultra wide sim racing setup, which I guess is only natural. You're trying to run a game on 3 monitors at maximum settings, so there obviously is going to be a limit to all that. But I mean, I guess I could tinker down the settings a little bit and get a higher frame rate, because 60 frames per second is okay, but I much more prefer like 90 across 3 monitors. And then finally, when it came to virtual reality, which I definitely do in my setup, I was able to get, with the Oculus Quest 2, using Virtual Desktop wirelessly, I was able to max out Half-Life Alyx with ultra fidelity wirelessly on the Quest 2 at just about 86 to 90 frames per second with the Quest 2, and with only about 43 milliseconds of latency. Now, running the Quest 2 wirelessly with your PC is a whole nother topic. I don't want to explain it in this video, but you can do it, and it is very cool. You are only limited by the built-in battery on the Quest 2, and I mean, here's a little clip of me actually tinkering with the Quest 2 without the cable, running Half-Life Alyx. It's a really cool setup, but yeah, no lag, no latency at all on this PC. The only thing holding, of course, that gaming experience back is the battery, and I guess the Wi-Fi if it decides to go nuts on me when I'm playing VR. So overall, I am satisfied with the PC here behind me. I guess if I could critique one thing that I wish was better, I wish was a little bit quieter, because the triple fan setup right here on my desk, I can hear it at times whenever I'm editing because it's just chugging air. And even when it comes to gaming, it's actually not too terrible because the GPU fan will spin up, and of course, I mean, it will cool it off. But I guess that's when I just go ahead and take my like headset, put it on my head, and that's just when the sound goes away. And even then with my Rode pod mic here, it won't really pick up that sound either. So sound-wise, it doesn't bug me too much, but at idle, it does produce noise because that X570 board does have that built-in fan, and I think that's actually the loudest component in this whole PC. But aside from that though, I'm feeling confident. This PC is definitely gonna have the horsepower to edit all of my videos and play whatever games I want it. And that 3080 is pretty much gonna be almost a permanent staple in that PC, because unless the 3080 Ti is around the same size, using the same cooler design, that might be the GPU that stays inside that PC permanently. So at this point, the only thing holding me back in making my videos is me and my schedule. So with all that said, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching all the way till the end. And if you did, I don't know, I don't have a gift for you right now. I would say something special, but we do need to wrap this video up. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and this is the Scatterable channel, signing out.